Yeah, thanks for joining. This is FOCIL Breakout number 12. Yeah, I don't think I have tons of updates on the research side. It was mostly around planning the FOCIL session for Berlin. Here is a little note I made with the speakers and what we're going to talk about when we are there. I think it's going to be quite excited, and we have lots to talk about. So um, yeah, stay tuned for that. I think we will discuss both like FOSOL as a candidate for Glamsterdam. I think there's a big question around the urgency of FOSOL, and maybe I encourage you to also think about that. Like how much of a priority FOSOL is compared to scaling EIPs. I think this has been like a big question these days. So if you have opinions or if you have thought about this, yeah, reach out or feel free to sort of like talk to me about it or anyone else. And yeah, and then we have like talks about like more like of the research on ZK FOSOL and statelessness and FOSOL, sort of like interactions with other proposals and upgrades, which is always sort of nice to explore. Yeah, and that's basically it for me. We do have a presentation today, and Ekaterini is going to present a paper we worked on together, but she's been doing most of the work by far. So I'm very excited for you to give that presentation, and I think we're going to start with this if you're ready.
Thank you, Thomas. Maybe should I share my screen now or we should wait?
Yeah, you can just share your screen.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Let me just give me 10 seconds to share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Katerina.
Wait, can you just click on the slideshow mode, maybe?
It is in the slide show mode. I don't know if should I. What?
We see the whole window.
Okay, let me see if I can minimize this. You don't see, you see the whole video, you don't see the slide.
I mean, we see it, but like we don't see it full screen.
Okay, let me show. Hmm. Okay, let me see, because it is slideshow in my window, but maybe in the sharing mode it's not. Maybe I will better share my whole screen. Maybe this works better. Let's do that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Mhm. Sorry, give me 1 second because like there is a synchronization problem with the Google Slides. I think this was the problem. Give me 1 second, please. Sorry for that. There were some connection problems, but I think now it has been fixed. Let me see. Oh, it's again. Oh, I think it's fixed now. Can you see now
Yeah.
my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Great, great. There were some connection problem today, but I think now it's fine. Great.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Katerina. I'm working in Nethermind, and this is a very recent joint work with Julian, Ma, and Thomas Thierry. And we uploaded very recently to Archive. And at the end of the slides, at the end of the presentation, I have also the QR code. This is the title of the paper. Just a small legal disclaimer that it's not any type of recommendation or advice, this presentation. And let's first discuss very high level which was the objective of this work. So in this work, we propose two concrete payment mechanisms for FOCIL that enhance the censorship resistance under bribery attacks. During the presentation, we will explain what exactly this means. And also, we would like to retain some good incentive properties of the current Ethereum fee mechanism. And in order to prove our statements formally, to prove exactly what censorship resistance we have and what incentive properties, we generalized in existing literature and specifically Tim Ravkarden's model in the transaction fee mechanism design. Before I start to discuss the bribery attack, I will just give a small overview of the FOSS protocol you already know, but just to highlight what is the honest behavior. So, like just a brief overview of what all the other parties do when everybody behaves honestly. And later we will see like the difference, what like happens other bribing attacks. So as you all already know, in FOSIL we have users that submit their transactions to the mempool, and the inclusion list committee, which is different, it's elected in every slot and it's different, choose transactions from the mempool and they put them in their inclusion list, one list per member. They broadcast these inclusion lists to the validators and to the attesters, and later the builder, the person who will construct the block, will see the inclusion list and create their block. And this block has to respect some requirements. And if these requirements are not met, the attesters later can reject the block. So the requirements say that the builder should include the inclusion list if there is space, but there are some cases when they can omit them. So, for example, if we are under congestion, meaning that there is not enough space for all the transactions in the mempool, the builder can create a full block, omit the inclusion list, and this block will be valid. Also, it's important to recall that in order to avoid MEV transaction in inclusion list, the inclusion lists are executed at the end of the block. So, like the block producer has the option to put other transactions in the top of the block and put the inclusion list, but at the end. So this means that if in the top of the block there is a transaction that drains a center's balance from the other transactions in inclusion list, then this transaction could invalidate them. But an honest user would never create such transactions. So this is the honest behavior. So like if everybody behaves honestly. Now we will see what happened when we have bribing attacks. We generalize the literature and we discuss several types of bribing attacks, but the simplest one is the following. We assume that there is an entity who is malicious, just want to censor, to pay and censor a transaction, a target transaction, and this entity is willing to pay money to the includers and or the block producer to censor a transaction. And this can be very simple. For example, they say that I will give you this money. They say to the includers or the block producer that they will give them money if they just omit this transaction. Or they can tell them more complicated rules. For example, that okay, they will pay them only if the attack is successful in the end and all the parties omit the transaction. But for our presentation, we can just assume that the briber is an entity that pays the includers and the block producer when they censor or otherwise omit the target transaction from the inclusion list or the block. So this is for the purpose of this presentation, this will be a briber. And if we have this external entity, now we will discuss what maybe some possible deviation a block producer could do if the bribe was very high. So, for example, in these attacks, the block producer would like to take the bribe and omit the transaction, but on the other side, they are afraid of their block being rejected by testers because if the target transaction is in an inclusion list, then the block producer the block producer we are not under congestion, which means that the block has empty space. The block producer cannot just ignore the transaction because okay they will take the bribe, but the block will be invalid, so they will lose the whole rewards. So the block producer could make some other things to take the bribe but make the block valid. One example is that they could just create transaction for them originated from themselves and put them in the block to make it full and to pretend that there is congestion. Every time we call this transaction fake because they are not originated from the users, but they are real transaction. When we say fake, we mean that they don't users transactions. They are originated from the block producer for an attack, but if we see them and they are valid transactions. So this is one thing that the block producer can do. Of course, this has a cost because the block producer to put all these transactions in the block, they have to pay the burning fee for all these transactions, which means that the bribe should be high enough in order to make them be in this to follow this action. But this is one thing that a deviant block producer could do. Another deviant strategy that a block producer may attempt is the following. They try to spam mempool in order to make includers prefer their transactions and ignore the target transaction. So somehow they try to create many transactions. So includers select the transactions of the block producer because it has higher fee or whatever, and they don't put the target transaction there. So the block producer does not have to respect this transaction. They can ignore it and take the bribe. Of course, this has again a huge cost because all these transactions, if they make it to the inclusion list, later they have to be in the block and again the block producer has to pay the burning fee and the same thing. But however, the block producer has an advantage that has the top of the block. This means that they could create one single transaction that drains the balance of the center of the other transactions and make them invalid. So this means that now he can omit them and not pay the bank fee. So what the block producer achieve is that they spam inclusion list. Target transaction which is about to be censored does not make it to inclusion list. The block producer ignores it, takes the bribe, and on the other side has not to respect their own fake transactions because now they are invalidated by a new transaction. So this is like something, this is a deviant strategy. And in our case, what we do is we were setting a payment mechanism that make this deviant strategy more costly, which means that a briber would need higher bribe, like in order to make a block producer do this. So like we were searching how like we could make this more expensive for the briber. But before we see what like how can be more expensive and continue, we will just make a summary of what we discussed and see like now how the fossil protocol is when like the parties are not honest. They do also other things. So summarizing, in the first phase, all the parties, users, includers, and block producer, send transactions to the mempool. The transactions that come from includers or block producer are called fake. And here we take into account also deviant strategies from the block producer where they try to spam the mempool. So like in the first phase, we have like this mempool that has transactions from everybody. In the next phase, includers again like can select transactions from the mempool, but also they can put their own transactions. Maybe if this gives them some reward or whatever, but they are allowed to do so, to put their own transaction there. And finally, the block producer see the inclusion list and they can put transaction from the mempool, from the inclusion list, but also they have the option to put their own transaction, which are called fake again, and they can put them in the block. So now this is not like the strategy because honest includers a block producer have the target goal to just put transaction from a user. It's like cover strategies where like some parties may want to create their own transactions to if they are under a bribing like attempt. So this is the summary of how like the protocol will look if like there were a bribery. And as we discussed before, we have shown that when there is no congestion, which means like that the block is not full, we have seen that the minimum bribe, we have proved that the minimum bribe a briber needs to censor a transaction is the sum of two components. One is the fee of the transaction that they want to censor, because like if the block producer ignores it, they will not take this fee, of course. And the other is the cost of the attack we described before. Because like the block producer, in order to be able to censor this transaction without have their block rejected, they should perform the attack we discussed, which is like spamming the mempool and later invalidate their own transaction with a single transaction and pay for this attack. So like in order for the briber to make a bribing successful attack, they need to pay both the block producer fee and to give a briber higher of the cost of this action that the block producer needs to do in order to ignore the transaction without having an invalid block. And the interesting thing is that we have shown that when like when we are in PBS, which means like that the builder is not 100% sure that they will be elected. In these cases, when we are not also under congestion, then it happens that the higher the fee, if we have a fee for the includers, also not for the block producer only, but also for the includers, this can make the cost of the bribing attack higher. This means like that the higher the fee of a vulnerable transaction for the includers, the more difficult is for the briber to censor this transaction. And an intuition behind this is that if the builder is not sure that they will be elected, and they have spammed the mempool, maybe if they don't get elected, they cannot invalidate these transactions. These transactions can end up to the block, and they have to pay for them, like to pay the burning fee, to pay the includer fee, and these things. So, like, this means that when we have an includer fee, this action is more risky for the builder and it has more expected cost, which means that bribers are more difficult. And for these reasons, we investigated payment mechanisms that don't give a fee not only to the block producer, to the builder, but they also give some fee to the includers. And we ended up with two mechanisms. Both of them satisfy two incentive properties of the current fee mechanism, and have and increase indeed the cost of bribing attacks. But they have some trade-offs. Like we will see what these trade-offs are. But first, let's explain which are these payment mechanisms at a very high level. So in the paper, you can see exactly like which is the payment mechanism, the structure of the fee, and how this it changes the current fee mechanism and this thing. But for the presentation, we keep it high level, like just to give the intuition. So the first payment mechanism is called double. And the reason is that the user sets two type of fees. One fee is for the block producer, as it is now in Ethereum, and the other refers to the includers. This is the general characteristic of the payment mechanism. Again, the fee will be paid only if the transaction make it to the block. So, like, it's the same thing as the current mechanism. And here, we have to determine how the includer fee will be shared inside the committee. Because, okay, the user says, I will give 10 very high level. No, it's not the exactly structure of the fee, but okay. Say I will give at a maximum 10 to the block producer and 11 to include the committee. Now we have to see how this fee is shared inside the committee. So the way it's shared inside the committee is the following. We will have assumed that the includer committee is assigned a random order. So every includer, when it's selected with a random order. So we assume that every committee member, when it's elected with a priority. So like it has a random number between 1 and the number of the members. So like the whole includer fee will go to the member with the best order who put the transaction in the inclusion list. So if 4 includers put the transaction in the inclusion list, the includer fee will go to the includer with the best order. And of course, this order is random. It's not some specific and the same like uh, in every slot. So this is, and actually it's quite simple because the difference with the current Ethereum mechanism is that there is an extra fee which is for the includers, and this fee goes to the includer with the best order that includes this transaction in the inclusion list. And this is the mechanism. The other mechanism, it's exactly the same. So like it has again the same way that the fee is shared inside the committee and this thing. The only difference is that the user sets a single fee, one fee, and the system determines the fraction that goes to the includer committee and to the block producer. So the only difference is that now the user sets a single fee and does not control the fraction of the fee that goes to the block producer and the includer. This is done by the system and it's the same for all the transactions. So like this is the difference. Otherwise, the two payment mechanisms are the same. They have an includer fee. The fee inside the committee is shared in the same way. It's everything the same between them. And here we have we discussed the trade-offs. It's both of them who have proved that they satisfy properties. As you see, if you are familiar with Rough Gardens model, this incentive properties. But what happened is that the single mechanism has the advantage that it's simpler because like the user doesn't do something extra, sets again one fee and waits for the system to make the splitting between the includer and the proposer. But on the other side, the double mechanism is a little more, the user needs to set an extra fee, which means it does something extra. But on the other way, it gives like the freedom to the user to select the fraction that wants to go to the includers. If they want to give something to the includer or they don't want to give anything to the includer and this thing. And this is an advantage because we have seen that we can achieve better censorship resistance depending on the characteristic of the transaction. So, like for example, depending on the whole fee of the transaction. So, it is not that there is an ideal splitting that the system can do in every transaction. Um, with tailored splitting, we can achieve a little better censorship resistant. But so this is the trade-off. Single is simpler because there is one fee and the system does the splitting. On the other side, double, it's less simple in the sense that the user selects one other fee, but otherwise it has more freedom for the user to set a fee that like it's the best like for the censorship resistant. And these are the two. These are like the two mechanisms that we propose in the paper. You can see like we have. You can see we explain um, exactly like how much bribe a briber needs in order like um, to create a bribing attack. We explain how they satisfy the incentive properties. You can see like the formal proofs in the paper. But this is the high level overview. And finally, the final part of our work was that we identified a class of mechanisms that are not ideal, like for our case. So, for example, because they create some problem in congestion. And one example, it's like a payment mechanism that does the following. Um, if a transaction is included in both in a block and in an inclusion list, then the whole fee goes to the includer because like this transaction is in an inclusion list. If a transaction is not in an inclusion list, is only in the block, the whole fee goes to the block producer. And this is a bad idea, like because if there is congestion, the block producer will always ignore all the transactions from inclusion list because, like, they can do due to congestion, they'll have other transactions to select, and they don't get any fee from these transactions. So we cannot, they will not. The block producer will not like select them. So, like in general, we have proved that when we are under congestion, a mechanism that give always a reward to the block producer are better compared to mechanisms that give the whole fee uh, to the includers. So like this is a general, this was like something, a negative result that we found for another type of mechanism. Just to summarize, like which are the key takeaways that we discussed, is that we saw that includer fees, if like transaction has a fee for the includers, this can increase the cost of censorship under bribing attacks. Thus, for this reason, we propose two mechanisms that involve includer fees. The first mechanism is called double, and the user sets two types of fees, one for the includers and one for the block producer. And the second type is called single, and the user sets a single fee, but the fee is the fraction that goes to the includer is determined by the system. And both these mechanisms satisfy two good properties like of Ethereum mechanism, incentive properties, but they have some trade-offs, like the single is simpler because there is one fee, but the double gives more freedom to the users to set like their own fraction that they want to go to the includers. So like this is like the main the main takeaways. And thank you for your time. Also, you can see here, like in the QR code, you can see the paper. And like, I'm happy like to discuss any questions, or like if you would like to elaborate on any slide, or talk more about the topic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the presentation. That was great. Does anyone have questions?
Well, thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. I just had a question about the way that the includer fee is distributed. So why is it just done on this ordering rather than splitting? So if multiple includers include the same transaction, why only give it to the top ranked one?
Good question. Actually, this the disadvantage, the advantage of this splitting is not to split like equally to all the member, is that if there is nobody in the committee, assume that nobody in the committee has included one transaction. All the one person of the committee, if they see, if for example we assume that they could see that this transaction is no inclusion list, if they take this transaction in their inclusion list, they will take the whole fee. They will so like what happens is that like they will they will take the whole fee, so like they have the advantage that they will not share this fee with others. Let me say, so what happened is that the includer with the highest order, when they include this transaction, they will take the whole includer fee, which means that bribing is more expensive because now the briber needs to give more to this person and needs to give the whole includer fee at least, and some extra stuff to make them ignore this transaction. If like the fee was splitting among 10 members, then every includer will take 1/10 of the fee, and they could deviate at even with a bribe which is like 1/10 of the transaction fees. So somehow, like this goes also with the OSIL or other mechanisms that they give like the whole fee to some, in some cases, like to the includer, is that we want the when an includer omits a transaction to lose the whole fee, not to lose 1/10 of the includer fee. I don't know if does make sense to you, or like.
Yeah, but generally I'm not sure that, say you're saying, say you knew that all of the other includers hadn't included something, but generally I'm not sure that you could know that, right? Because you're all kind of constructing, I guess you're observing which ILs are being gossiped, but then you'd have an incentive to wait and see everyone else's inclusion list first.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Good point. Actually, I have to correct because I was thinking when we have an order, good point, you need to know only your order. You don't need like to know what the other includers have included, because what happened is that the advantage of the order, as you say, is that if I am the person with the best order, I know that if I put this transaction, I will take the whole fee. Even if other 10 people do the same, I have priority. So somehow, if you know the size of the inclusion list, only this, the maximum size, and you know your order, and assume that all the other people are rational, which means that they will select the transactions with the highest includer fee, you can compute on your own which transaction will be taken. So, for example, if I am a person with order 3, I will know that the first two persons with the best order will take the best transactions. So, like, I will don't make an attempt to put this in my inclusion list, because even if I put them, I will not take any fee. The other have priority. I will put the next available transaction. So, the advantage of the order is that you can predict um, what the other will do without actually see their inclusion list. You imagine that a person will select the best includer fees, the transaction with the best includer fees that match their order. So, for example, if an inclusion list has size 10, the person with order 1 will select the 10 transaction with the best fee. The person with order 2 will select the best transaction in terms of fee, but beginning of 11th until 20th. So somehow, if a person knows their order, they can somehow make order the fee according to the includer fees and select the part that belongs to them somehow. And if all are rational, like they will have, this is the best they can do, like to maximize their profits, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, but I guess it does kind of break the property we have that, you have like a one of n honesty assumption. So now you can sort of map, say if you're the third ranked, these are this range of transactions I'm estimating are going to be like if everyone else chooses rationally. Yeah, sorry, what I'm saying is like before we have this, you can have multiple includers that you'd have to bribe, whereas now there's just one.
Mm-hmm.
And it also assumes that everyone's going to follow the same strategy. And like I'm just not completely sure that the most rational behavior necessarily is to assume that everyone's going to do that, or that someone might follow a different strategy, or that if this is the fee that's associated with the transaction that include a tip, there might be other incentives outside. So so you can know that this is going to go to the rank third person, right? So you can just bribe them. You don't have to worry about anyone else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, yeah, sure. So what we do is again, like if the other persons are not rational, then you may like ignore some transaction that could give you like some fee. Because like if I say, okay, I have order 2, so I will not select the highest fee transaction because person with order 1 will do. If the person with order 1 doesn't do this, it's a pity because I could take this transaction because of the bribing. But what happened is that in our model, we compute what happens at an equilibrium. So, like, of course, in the equilibrium, we assume that all the others do the indicated strategy, and what you see what you do. So, like, it is this equilibrium assumption, but also we take into account bribings. So, there is the assumption that okay, assume that all are rational. This is the rational things to do. But the good thing is that we capture bribing in this rational behavior. We don't think that they are rational ignoring bribes. The proofs we do is that we think that the other people are rational and they take bribes. And also we have in our model we take into account that you may not be sure about if the other person takes or not bribe. So somehow we make the proof agnostic that like I don't know like if the other people take or not bribe, but again, what is my behavior in an equilibrium? So somehow we assume that all the rational people, it is this rational assumption, of course, which is an assumption, right, that they are rational, but we don't consider them that they don't take bribe. We say, okay, they are rational, but they may take bribe, which means that if the bribe is high enough, they may censor. And also we take into account that every person is not sure about the bribe of the other. They cannot know if they are bribed. So somehow we do something like Bayesian mass equilibrium, where you don't know exactly which is the other player, but you have some beliefs. You believe like that with 50%, like they take a bribe or not. So, like on one side, it is the assumption of rationality, as you say, which is an assumption because we consider them rational. But on the other side, we don't consider them rational without bribe. We leave the thing that they may take bribe and censor the transaction. So this is like what we take into account.
Yeah, thank you. I need to read through it. Sounds interesting. But just one more thing I'm thinking about with this is, we're only considering rational as responding to bribes, but what if the includers actually trying to get their own transaction included? Then they might have an incentive to pretend that they're going to accept the bribe so that the briber doesn't bribe other people, but it's actually they're going to put it in their inclusion list anyway to get their own transaction included. You see what I mean? So they might have this other incentive as well.
Actually, very good.
Sorry, I think I'm gonna have to sort of like cut it here just to make sure we have time for like the implementation updates. But if you guys can either follow up in the chat or later, that would be great. Yeah, I hate to do this, but I want to make sure at least we get like 15 minutes for like the implementation sort of updates.
So I can answer in the text, right? I can.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Mark, I will answer
great.
you in the text. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks a lot. And thanks again for the presentation. Yeah, I do want to hear about things that have been happening on the implementation side of things. I did see quite a lot of things in the Discord channel. So if anyone wants to share updates, that would be great.
I can start. So it looks like we got the changes to the EIP merge, which is great. I have a PR on the execution specs for yeah, essentially just adding a branch with the FOCIL EIP, and then based on that, also have a branch of the execution spec test, which I don't have a PR open for yet. Although I can if that makes the discussion easier. Would be nice if at least the EL clients could verify they can generate the test fixtures and consume them. Right now, these are marked as engine test only, so they generate Hive fixtures. At least that's what they're called in the execution spec test documentation. But yeah, that's mainly the update. And then yeah, I think I'll change the implementation in the execution specs PR to not attempt to execute each transaction, but to kind of statically verify these transactions. But yeah, that's mainly it.
Nice. Yeah, thanks. That's awesome. And so you said what will help now is having EL clients sort of like try and generate tests from what you made?
To try to generate them and also consume them.
Okay.
Which
And yeah, sorry.
I imagine. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I imagine they would be familiar, or at least likely to be familiar with that execution spec test. But if not, there's some documentation on how to consume the test.
Nice. And so that would be because yeah, I mean, so far you've been working on the REF side of things, and Jehun has been working on the GET side of things, and then Mark has been working on the Zermine. But so we need input from GET and REF people, or can you and Jehun start testing things? Like, or is it just like something client devs have to do?
And it doesn't have to necessarily be client does, but I've definitely been spending less. Like I haven't really spent much time on the Reth code base in a while.
Okay.
So yeah, if there's someone that's more actively working on the EL implementation, then
Nice. Okay. Yeah,
but
that's great. That makes sense. Cool. Thanks a lot. Any other updates?
Yeah, I think I can go next. I opened the draft PR to assess the specs. There was a feedback that why we have such changes is unclear, so I left detailed reasons behind the change. Please be aware that the work is not finished yet, so it lacks several tests and so on, and I'm planning to get back to it after the Berlin interop. I also reached out to Lighthouse. I was told that it was just low priority so far, so I did some debugging to help them out a little bit, but of course there are some more work to be done to get the interop work. Yeah, that's it all from my end.
Great. That makes sense. I don't remember who was working on FOCIL from the Lighthouse side. Do you know?
Ethan, I believe.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Great, thanks a lot. Nice. Mark, I remember you maybe wanted to touch on things about the EIP as well.
Yeah, so I have another PR open, which hopefully people can take a look at, which is related to the inclusion list building, and specifically adding a flag so that that is passed to the inclusion list builders, that gives them like a unique ID that they can use, and this helps to kind of control the amount of overlap between different inclusion lists. But yeah, the kind of reason I think this is important is so we kind of have this like slow path. Oh yeah, sorry, I'll send a link to the PR in a second. Yeah, so we have sort of like this this slow inclusion path, which is where, say, your transaction's been pending for a while, then eventually like it will be given high scores by the builders because they'll see that it's been pending for a while, and then hopefully lots of them will try and include it. But that doesn't necessarily give you very quick inclusion. So what I think can help here is if you have some like randomness, then essentially even if your transaction's only just been sent, so it's not obvious that it's going to be censored yet, you might get randomly picked by an inclusion list builder. So yeah, I think this generally helps to increase the kind of throughput of the inclusion lists by and the speed of inclusion is the kind of motivation.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Would be nice if people can take a look at the PR. I think it generally makes sense. It's also things we've talked about before, but I think some of them are nice to add in the IP to guide how EL clients ultimately want to build the inclusion lists according to what the criteria they sort of like value most. I think it provides like good guidelines. Okay, great. And then I remember seeing things about transaction visualization and metrics. Are there any updates there, or like from any other clients?
Yeah, I just shared the draft PR about metrics. If you are interested to look at, it's beacon metrics. Yeah, I hope to update it during the Berlin interop because I'm a little bit outdated. Was busy with PeerDAS, so yeah, I hope to discuss them in Berlin as well. But you can just take a look and decide if you need any specific metrics. So that would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, it was great. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I'll definitely take a look, and if any other people want to take a look as well, I think that's useful to sort of like agree on the set of metrics. It would be nice to track for.
Yeah, and also good news that we now have execution metrics specs repo. If Jihoon has any ideas which metrics should be standardized, yeah, that will be also great to share. because we have nice results about the standardization. It's much easier to test the interop, which is we are now doing on PeerDAS. So we will definitely benefit from it.
Cool. Yeah, very nice. Great. And I remember you shared that in the Discord channel in any case. So if anyone wants to take a look. Any other updates? Okay, if not, thanks everyone for joining the session. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see some of you in person in Berlin. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
In Berlin.
Yeah.